Hello everybody, it's your friendly digital technology librarian, Christy here. We've reached another Friday, so of course I have another Film Rec Friday ready for everybody out there. So with the Golden Globes kicking off award season last Sunday, I thought that this would be the absolute perfect time to remind patrons of just how many phenomenal award-winning films are available whenever they want to stream just by using their Milan-Berlin library cards. So today's recommendations are all very recent feature films that are available on both our Hoopla and our Kanopy service. And as always, as I mentioned, these are available entirely for free with your Milan-Berlin library card. So without any further ado, let's go ahead and get to the recs. Okay, my first recommendation, as mentioned, available on both Hoopla and Kanopy, was released in 2022, and that is The Whale. Darren Aronofsky's film was probably one of 2023's most talked about movies for a number of reasons. The most prominent of which was Brendan Fraser's performance. But we'll get to that in just a moment. So, basic rundown. In this film, which is based on a play of the same name, we are following Charlie, who is a reclusive and morbidly obese online English teacher. He has had a very bad string of very bad luck. And he's at the point in his life where he is very, very tragically, essentially eating himself to death. He knows that really the end is kind of imminent, and he is at this point resigned to his fate, and what he really wants is just some piece of redemption. He is throughout the film always looking for that, especially with his daughter, from whom he is estranged. He left his daughter and his mother and her mother 8 years prior to when we meet him in the film. No spoilers. That's part of the premise. And so for this entire feature film, we see him trying to come to grips with his reality and also still trying to forge some sort of connection with his daughter, who is played by the phenomenal Sadie Sink, who a lot of people may know from Stranger Things. Every scene that the two of them are in together is so charged. It's very much a heightened emotion kind of film. This is from Darren Aronofsky, who is sort of very much known for high emotions, bordering on melodrama, not necessarily in a bad way, but that sort of intensity pretty much constantly throughout things. And there are pockets of real quiet in this movie, I think in part because it is based on a stage play in which that sort of quietness is sort of necessary in the story. But at the same time, all of the interactions, of course, in particular, the interactions between father and daughter, but the interactions Charlie has with his home care, healthcare nurse, his online students, a gentleman who is essentially a missionary who's trying to preach to him, and even the pizza delivery guy with whom he has an odd sort of relationship with too. This film revolves around those kinds of interactions. He's so isolated, and yet these key members of society that he does manage to let himself know in some way, it just snowballs into this sort of living, seething lump of emotions, where you're caught up in every single time, every time that he interacts with anyone. It's going to be something important, because we're dealing with such an intense topic, like that creeping end, which I think is pretty clear from the beginning of the film. Brendan Fraser, of course, had a huge heyday in the 90s and the early 2000s. He was that heartthrob. He was in a ton of really, really big budget and box office films. And then there's this very long period of nothing, of silence, hiatus, whatever you want to call it. And then for him to come back with a role like this, it was incredibly impressive on a lot of levels. Of course, for at this point in his career, he's no longer that heartthrob, but he also took it to the next level. And yes, a great deal of his appearance in this is dealt with via CGI and prosthetic, but he also very much personally changed his appearance in order to sort of prep for it. In addition, it's just a different side to his acting that we haven't seen. Probably the closest that we would have gotten to this kind of acting style would have been one of his last performances in The Quiet American, which is based on a Graham Greene novel, where we're dealing with like heavy, intense emotion. And to be honest, I don't even know that I would have seen this coming from even The Quiet American, which is definitely one of my favorite films of his. Again, I mentioned Sadie Sink does an excellent job here. Plays this sort of defiant, frustrated, angry teenager with good reason. Again, we have to remember that the father figure she's dealing with here abandoned her and her mother. So there's a reason to all of the teen angst that we get to see on screen, and it never goes to the point where it's a caricature. It's not at all. Hong Chau, who actually received a Academy Award nomination for this, and Brendan Fraser did actually win the Academy Award for this for his role. But Hong Chau, she plays the at-home healthcare nurse. She also has other ties that we find out about with Charlie too, and she plays this fine line of healthcare practitioner, but we also know that there's something else going on, and it's a real mystery to unravel the way that she interacts with Charlie. Why does she behave this way? What is the impetus? Because it's certainly not just from a healthcare professional kind of standpoint. And then his ex-wife is played by the incomparable Samantha Morton, who is just incredible all the way around. I think most mainstream audiences probably know her from either the Starz series Serpent Queen right now that she stars in, or Starz, Starz, the channel, and The Walking Dead. She also had a very large role towards the end of the series in that as well. In any case, it's a stellar cast. It's a really small film in that it's so focused on the individuals and on the character work and really on Charlie, but it's so big emotionally. And I think that is one of the things that makes this film really worth checking out. It's not an easy watch. It's certainly not something to put on in the background when you're just having a good day. That's not this kind of film. Like I said before, there are so many elements of tragedy in this, but there's also this defining desire for redemption that I think permeates everything. It really ebbs and flows throughout the film, that desire to find for the next step to try and reach that goal, but it's always there. And the way those two things, the tragedy and the hope, sort of blend together is really fascinating. And it's never a hope that he will get better as far as health goes. I think it's pretty clear from the beginning that that's not what this movie is about. So if you're seeking that sort of very defined happy ending, that this is not that kind of movie. And I don't think it's a spoiler to explain that if you're searching for something beyond, if you're searching for something that's like fairly cut and dry, this is not going to do it for you. And Aronofsky's generally not, his films are absolutely not like that. So take a look at some of his earlier work, and I think you'll kind of see, what we're dealing with overall story arc wise. Since we are tying all of today's stories to awards, as I mentioned, this one was a biggie as far as performances go. It did garner Brendan Fraser an Academy Award. It garnered Hong Chau a nomination at the very least. It was not as lauded overall as a movie, just because, again, There it does definitely tend toward the melodramatic side of things, but as far as performances go, this cast is ridiculous and they did an exceptional job. So if you're looking for something brilliantly acted and you do want to see a real character study, I can't recommend this enough. It is really fantastic. Again, available on both Hoopla and Kanopy, 2022's The Whale. Okay, next up is 2022's Everything Everywhere All at Once. If there is one film you watched from the big 2023 awards cycle, it should be this one. I absolutely love this film, and I think it is so beautiful and so brilliantly made. It is, though, don't get me wrong, completely weird, and it is described as an absurdist comedy drama for a reason. So out of the mainstream, especially for movies that do tend to be critical darlings, but it doesn't matter. It was that good. So in this film, we are following a woman who seems to be very, very ordinary. She has a marriage that's struggling for a lot of reasons, but she keeps going every day. She has difficult relationship with her family, with her daughter in particular, and then something happens that just sort of gives her these very strange powers, and she's sort of sucked into this kind of interdimensional realm where she can travel to different dimensions as herself and face all of these different people who always seem to be revolving within her life. And it's got action, it's got romance, it has martial arts, it has science fiction, fantasy, a lot of comedy, a lot of drama. And, it's one of those films that at first glance seems very much coded towards Asian culture, but is actually super universal because the emotions that we're dealing with and the interpersonal relationships that we're dealing with within this are universal. It really isn't just, these things are not happening to her just because she happens to be Asian. It just happens to be another layer of the story. You have tons of award nominations and awards that it won. And it's just such a good movie. I wish that it was accessible to absolutely everyone. But the fact that it is available for free to you who happen to have a Milan-Berlin library card is really, really awesome. So one of the big things that people harp on about is that the Russo brothers, who of course are the creators and writers behind Stranger Things, are the producers of this film, which was just a small movie that just sort of snowballed out of nowhere. Your lead character, the woman who ends up sort of bouncing between dimensions, is played by Michelle Yeoh, who is just phenomenal and has been for literal decades. And she plays Evelyn, who is a Chinese American immigrant. She is being audited by the IRS in the not real world, but in the present where we first meet her, and it's just causing all of these difficulties, as I mentioned. And when we see her in all of these different lives, these potential universes, it's not like any of them are perfect. It's sort of that revelation that there are always going to be problems, but there are also always going to be threads and connections between people. And that's one of the things that I found so beautiful in this. The relationship that Evelyn has with her husband. It's one of those things where it's so moving because you see this love that they have that struggles in almost all the universes, but it's still present and it's still just this living, breathing thing that love and that romance can be that for some people. It doesn't hurt that Evelyn's husband is played by Ke Huy Quan, who is probably best known as Short Round in the Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom film. There were years when he was not active, and then for him to leap into this role, he won everything. He won tons of awards, and it was very well deserved. His character is much smaller in a lot of senses. Emotionally, he doesn't have as much, flash as, say, the Evelyn character, but it's so deep and it's so resonant, and it's just really a very present kind of role. He's this quiet sort of touchstone through all of the lives, and it's just so well done. Jamie Lee Curtis is in this and was also nominated and winning everything, and she's also phenomenal. She's one of those actresses that I think has been part of the American film lexicon for so long that we forget how good she is. um I mean, we all know she did like the Halloween movies and blah blah blah, but she's at the very base level a fantastic actress. She's a great comedian, but she just embodies whatever role. And some of the characters some of the kinds of versions of herself that she plays in this are amazingly out there, but she just digs in and she does it. Again, when you're dealing with absurd comedy, it's kind of difficult for a lot of actors to really get into those roles because you're not dealing with, you know, a Stanislavski kind of method version of acting. It's not like, any kind of Marlon Brando style. Who am I? How am I playing this? What the realism is within this. You can't method it out, and it's amazing how well she's able to do those things for really outlandish characters. Um, James Hong plays Michelle Yeoh's Evelyn's father, and also incredible performances. And again, a character actor that we see in tons and tons of movies, and we have seen since probably the 70s. I remember the first thing I think I've ever seen James Hong in was um, Big Town and Little China. I still remember thinking he was amazing as a villain in that. And he's still playing phenomenal characters in 2022, 2023. And I mean, you can see why he's been a working actor for so long. He really is so good at whatever character you throw at him. So this one is one of those movies that, both on the technical and production side, is amazing. Writing, storyline, fantastic. And then the acting is also just as good. When you have a film that does such an amazing job on one end or the other, it's rare that they can meet it on the other avenue, and this one just really does. It's one of those movies that I think I will probably continue to watch at least once or so every year, because there's always something new to find. Every time I've watched this, and I've watched it many times already, I catch something that I didn't catch in the viewing previously. So it stands the test, I think, at least short term, and I'm pretty sure this is going to be a long-term classic. So again, available on both Hoopla and Kanopy, everything everywhere all at once. Absolute must watch. Okay, so my final recommendation for this week is 2020's Minari. This is a lovely, small, quiet film all about the American dream. It follows a Korean American family as they move from California to a very, very homogenous, very, very small Arkansas town, where they decide to purchase a farm where they can grow Korean produce, which will be sold in a larger city in Texas to the Korean community. And on paper, this is a great idea. You're going to grow a very specific, very desired produce to sell to a community that desperately wants and needs it. But there's so much more than just that sort of on paper plan. This family is not necessarily a family that knows how to farm. It's not a family that grew up farming in the US with farming culture, the American farming culture, and the American, climate, and all of these other issues that come into play when you're dealing with agriculture, and all of the difficulties that come from uprooting your family to an area that doesn't really have any roots for it. And it's a really interesting exploration of what the American dream is and what it means for different people. Um, in this film, we are dealing with the complex relationship between finding a new dream and forging a new way, and yet still being tied to who you are as like culturally, as you know, connecting to a past and an ancestry that is very clearly going to inform what you're doing today, and how difficult that can be when you are so isolated. This family moves to a place where they are certainly the only family of Asian descent and really of color in general, at least that we see within this film. So you're working on so many different levels. Um, this one is phenomenal because even through all of that, we're clearly dealing with very much like a cultural difference, and dealing with the sort of feel of what it's like as an outsider in the 1980s in Arkansas, in the US. But we're also dealing with, you know, familial friction as well. Not everyone necessarily wanted to move from a much more cosmopolitan area of California to this very rural section of the United States. Uh, our main character, he has this vision in mind, but it's not necessarily everybody else in his family's vision. Uh, and then compounding that, we have some generational friction going on. When he moves, he of course moves his immediate family with his wife and his two children, but also his mother, who very much is still very, very Korean. She doesn't really speak much English. And then he's plopped his family in this area, which clearly is not going to be very open to that necessarily. And we're just seeing how many difficulties they're all dealing with, and how they're sort of assimilating into this new life that they have. It's very interesting to see, especially the relationship between the grandmother and the two children, the two kids who, no surprise, have the easiest time assimilating into the new community. Kids are super resilient. They also are able to shift and change viewpoints so easily, no matter where you plop them, you know. And the two kids do an amazing job here, and we have an especially difficult relationship between the youngest child, the boy, with his grandmother, because again, as mentioned, she speaks nearly zero English, and he pretty much only speaks English, and he's very much wanting to be part, seen as, you know, everyday normal kid in this town, in this new community. And having this outlier is so frustrating, and seeing it play out on screen is really, really interesting, and really challenging too, because you watch it and you want to figure out a way to smooth out that friction. It's frustrating in a lot of ways. um I do think that one of the elements that I liked the most about this film, besides just the performance and the storyline itself, is the fact that it's based on the the filmmaker's own childhood growing up in the 80s, and how his family was experiencing this sort of trajectory of trying to fit in new places where it wasn't necessarily conducive to outside families. So this one won tons and tons of awards. It was nominated for the Academy Award in Best Picture, Director, Original Score, Screenplay, Actor, and Supporting Actress. And the Best Supporting Actress, who was the grandmother, did in fact win for her performance. She did take home the Oscar for that. And she's the first Korean to win an Academy Award for acting, which is unbelievably impressive. It also garnered the Golden Globe for Best Foreign Language Film. This is a movie that has both subtitles and a bit of English. I would say like the meat of things going on are going to be in the Korean language with English subtitles, but there is some English interspersed throughout the movie. It also won a big Screen Actors Guild for Outstanding Performance by a Cast, which will be no surprise when you watch this. Every single person in this movie is fantastic. From the kids through the adults, it just really, really is an excellent, excellent movie. So if you are looking for a family drama that explores a lot of fascinating themes, that has that sort of very recent period piece feel, and it does, I mean, you can tell, especially if you grew up in a rural area, that this is 1980s rural America. It's just so interesting to watch. I love the performances, and I really did think that this quiet movie was an excellent, excellent option. Okay, so those were my recommendations for this week and our sort of kickoff to awards season. If you have any award-winning or at least nominated films that you'd like to recommend from recent years, please comment with those below. If you have any recommendations for future themes you'd like to see us cover, definitely share those. Always looking for help with that. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and close out this episode. Thank you so, so much for joining me. I love putting these together, and hopefully we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.